What is your best ghost/paranormal experience story? U/NJW_90 responded. This is my brother's story, but it's a good one. He was working as a night porter at an old hotel from the 18th century in the northern English countryside. One night, a woman came down to reception as white as a sheet with her suitcase, saying she could not sleep and did not want to stay there. My brother inquired as to why. She said she could hear children laughing all night and a child had entered her room with a candle and was standing at the foot of the bed and wouldn't leave. My brother mentioned it to his manager the following morning, and he was told that it is a regular occurrence. Before the hotel was a hotel, it used to be used as a school and kindergarten over 100 years ago. U/ArcherOK6223 responded. Not a ghost story or paranormal, but a true experience. Many years ago I was working in a shop and an old lady had purchased several bags of shopping. It was a little icy outside and I knew the lady lived less than 100 yards away from the shop, so I offered to take her shopping home for her. She was shocked that I would offer and ever so grateful. On the way to her house she kept saying thank you to me. I told her it was no problem and I was happy to help. She said she wished more people like me were helpful, etc., etc. As we reached her door, she opened it and stepped away so I could enter. I told her that I was okay holding the bags and she should go in the house and get out the cold. She thanked me again and stepped in the doorway and took a few steps down the hall. I walked in behind her and put the shopping bags on the floor. I asked her if she wanted me to help her put things away and she insisted I had done enough and thanked me again and again. I stepped outside and turned round to say bye to her. As she was closing the door she said, "Thank you, young man, I will watch over your soul from heaven." A few days later she was found dead in her home, in the hallway, next to a few bags of slowly rotting shopping. U/deleted responded. Me reading these stories while my cat looks at me from down my darkened hallway, her eyes reflecting the light. LOL. I've had a bunch, but one that stands out was probably the time my then youngest son had gotten me up crying about a bad dream he was having at 3 a.m. He was 4 at the time. I calmed him down, then he told me he's hungry, so we go to the kitchen for a snack. He's sitting there eating cereal when he just kind of looks up and then casually tells me the boy who woke him up is sitting in the corner crying. And he nods to an empty corner of the room by the table where we're seated. I asked him why the kid is crying, just kind of humoring him, when he tells me his mommy crashed the car up the road and now he's trying to figure out what's going on. He woke me up, please tell him to go. So me, thinking it's my kid still shook from the bad dream, look at the corner and say, "Hey kid, go back to your mom." We keep sitting there and my son finishes his cereal and hands me the bowl. Just kind of joking around I ask him if it worked and the kid left. And he looks at me really seriously and say, "Yes, he told me the ambulance is coming so it's okay. They're all dead anyways." And not even a minute later a string of cop cars and an ambulance go past our house, sirens blazing. And I got this feeling of the most intense dread while the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I shook it off, told myself it was just a kid's imagination and coincidence. We went back to bed. A few days later my neighbor tells me all about the big wreck a mile up the street from us where some lady was going too fast and flipped the car coming around a curve and no one survived. At 3 o'clock in the morning on the night my kid had woken me up. I didn't dare ask her if a little boy was in the car. U/Pugnator48 responded. My brother's bedroom was next door to mine growing up. One afternoon, he asked me what I was doing the previous night that made me laugh so much. Confused, I pressed him for details. "About 3 a.m. last night, your laughter woke me up. It sounded like you were pacing your room, too. Pacing and laughing." At this point I told him that I wasn't home last night. I'd been at a friend's house. He went pale. To this day he swears blind that it was my laugh. I have a very distinct laugh, apparently. U/pork_9 responded. Camping at a friend's family property with a group of friends. They had a huge dingy shop full of old tools and old furniture that was super creepy. Dirt floor, clown paintings in the loft, not even kidding. We stayed up late drinking by the fire and I was the last one awake. Went to go pee on the side of the shop and stood about 5 feet away looking inside through the window. There was a fluorescent light on and I noticed what looked like a piece of paper or dollar kind of floating around. I thought it was a moth at first, but it was moving in a very flowing figure 8 pattern that was very rhythmic. It reminded me of dangling a carrot. I watched it for maybe 20 seconds, which felt like forever. Then it quickly floated back to the corner of the shop where it was dark. There was also a wood chair near the corner that added to the creepiness. Could have been a moth though. I sat back down by the fire to finish my beer and have a smoke. No one else was awake, so I played Robot Unicorn Attack 2 on my phone for a while. I noticed my friend Mark pop out of his tent to pee, then go back in to go to sleep. I decided sleep sounded good, so I went to my tent and fell asleep. The next morning, we were having breakfast and Mark said, "I saw you guys sitting by the fire super late. How late did you stay up?" I told him I was probably 2 or 3 a.m. Then he said, "Who was up with you?" I told him I was the last man standing. He said, "I got up to pee and saw you on your phone and 2 people over your shoulder watching you play." He said one person looked bigger, so he thought it was one of our friends, who was a bigger dude. He said the other person was taller and skinny, but none of us are noticeably tall or skinny. Freaked me out. We still camp at that property once a year, but I don't go in the shop, and I go to sleep whenever my wife decides she's tired. You/human foie gras responded. The house I grew up in was haunted. The way it was laid out, I could see from my bedroom down the hall and into the living room. My parents' bedroom door was on the other side of the living room directly across from my door. Late at night I would hear someone pacing circles in the living room, but I was the only one awake in the house and we didn't have pets. I never said anything because I didn't want the family to think I was nuts. Eventually I moved out and went to college. After I graduated I was in a rough spot financially. My parents had bought a new house, the old one was still empty, they were considering getting renters, and offered it to me to stay in for a while. I said no, I didn't want to move in. Mom asked why. I finally gave in and told her I thought there was a ghost. My mom froze and turned to look at me and was like, "You hear her too?" Turns out she had also heard it for years and didn't say anything for the same reason. You/deleted responded. I had just started a new job. The building I worked in was really old, definitely pre-war. I had to stay a bit later than I normally would to get something done, and by the time I was packing up to leave, my floor was pretty empty. I needed to use the restroom before I left, so I walked over there, and as I approached the door I saw someone else open the door and go in. I remember vividly that they were wearing a pink shirt and khakis, because that's what I was wearing, too. I was also mildly annoyed, because I don't like being in the bathroom when someone else is in there. After deciding I still definitely needed to pee before the commute home, I entered the bathroom. But when I got in, it was completely empty. I don't know how to describe the energy in the room, but it was very tense. Completely silent. I remember being able to hear my heartbeat. After standing completely frozen for what felt like 10 minutes, it was probably like 15 seconds, turned right around and left. I had nightmares about that bathroom for weeks. It seems so simple and uninteresting compared to a lot of other people's stories here, but it really shook me. There was something definitely off about the whole thing. Glad I work from home now. You/BadaSBitch22 responded. A bit paranormal perhaps. My grandfather got into the hospital on a Friday night. Nothing too unusual. He wasn't doing good, but he had been there before. The next day, I go to work. I'm somewhat worried, but again, he'd been there before. I go on with my day, there are customers, a friend stops by and we talk, and I fill the rest of the time with homework. My grandfather is in the back of my mind, but I have other stuff going on, you know. Right around 4 o'clock, I was chatting with a coworker when I glanced at the clock and my stomach dropped. I randomly got filled with dread and profound sadness. I continue chatting, but the feeling persists. I check out at 5, the feeling of gloom persisting, and of course my brain goes to my grandfather. I just knew. I get home and my mother tells me my grandfather passed away. I ask around what time. 4 o'clock. You/Kpanimal responded. Small but weird, I rented a room in a New England farmhouse, grad school. First night, about 2 in the morning, I had a very, very clear feeling I was being checked out by some sort of house spirits, but they approved. I went back to sleep. First time my girlfriend came over, she sat up in bed. I asked what's up, and it was almost word for word, something was checking her out but there was no threat. A few weeks later my brother came over, next morning, unprompted as he came downstairs he said he felt like something was checking him out at night but it was okay. A new housemate, later, said the same thing his first morning. None of them knew each other, it was weird. TLDR, 4 guests in a New England farmhouse said spirits checked them out the first night. You/Micho Homo responded. When I was in my early 20s I owned a hearse. It wasn't much to look at but it was a lot of fun to own. Anyway, all funeral cars have a partition that separates the driving compartment from the coach area where the casket or gurney, yes, mine was that old, was kept. I would park the car in the morning when I got home from work, and that night when I would return to the car the glass partition was open several inches. Every night I would close the glass and every morning the glass would again be open. Some thought that someone was screwing with me and I considered that, but to faithfully keep up that gag for well over a year is a bit much. It happened every single day, not most days but every day. I suspect that a spirit in the car did not like the partition closed for some reason. In the summer it would get really hot back there, and in the winter, cold. The AC didn't work and the heater core for the rear was bad. Maybe they wanted a better temp. It didn't bother me, and I actually thought it was kind of cool. U/Mediacree responded. My youngest sisters are twin. Back before they were born, I remember this old lady I didn't know was hanging outside my neighbor's house said to me, "There's two. There's definitely two in there," roughly translated from my language. She come to our house like 3 to 4 times and will always repeat that to me. So Elle always believed that we are going to have a twin. I even remember walking up at night once to pee, and I saw my dad sitting at the sofa. He asked me what should we name my sisters, and I would recommend names in pairs, stupid names of course. I was like 6. Well, couple of years before my mom passed away from cancer we started going down memory lane. And my mom talked about having to come up for the second name for my sisters since they only prepared one. And I'm like, why only one? And mom said because they didn't know my sister is a twin. And I said, but we did know. The lady told us. And mom said, no, we didn't know. Apparently both my dad and mom only found out about the twin after they came out. Creepy thing is, my dad did remember me suggesting 2 names and thought that I was just joking. I told them about the lady, but none of them remember her. U/Clandestine Birch responded. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I was at my grandmother's house for Christmas and was playing hide and seek with some of my cousins. For context, the house was big, worn-down Victorian house that had been moved from its original location to the plot of land my grandmother owned. It was very cold and drafty, especially in certain rooms. The upstairs where we were playing consisted of 4 bedrooms, 3 of which opened to a large landing, one of which was down a longish hall. Most of us, along with our immediate families, were staying the night, but for some reason no one ever stayed in that 4th room. As a child I always thought it was my grandfather's room. He died about 10 years prior to my birth, but in hindsight I'm not sure why. As far as I know that wasn't true, and certainly no one ever told me it was. Anyway, it was around 8 p.m. and my turn to count, and of course the person counting went into the separate room to do so. I sat on the bed, closed my eyes and counted to 20. When I opened my eyes it was light out. Morning. I'd closed my eyes at night, counted to 20, and somehow 12 hours had passed. Of course, the immediate thought is that maybe I just fell asleep. I'll refute that with 3 points. First, why didn't my cousins come get me when I failed to seek them? Second, it was cold in that house. We would sleep multiple people to a bed under several blankets, at least one of which was usually electric. I can't imagine sleeping through the night in that kind of cold without some kid of covering. And third, there's no way my parents wouldn't have bothered to come find me before they went sleep, and when they did find me, they wouldn't have left me there, especially without a blanket. I can't tell you what happened. Maybe I had some sort of strange memory lapse that just happened to begin and end in the same location. Maybe the simulation lagged. Maybe I really did skip 12 hours. All I can say for sure is that something happened that night, and LVE never been able to explain it. U/Yeediarrange responded. A few years back some friends and I were driving on some back roads in a patch of woods believed to be haunted. One of my friends was getting bored, so he rolled down his window and shouted, "Make something happen," or something along those lines. About 5 seconds after he rolls up the window, there is a strong, seemingly too well timed to be natural knock on the window closest to me. We've seen some weird shit in those woods, but nothing that couldn't be explained by shadows or animals. There is no explanation for that knock. Nothing was thrown at the car, we weren't moving, it sounded the way a knock made by a human hand sounds, etc. Actually later on, we heard a very feminine shriek in those woods with no explanation either. So there's that. U/Goose Rider 3000 responded. One Sunday morning I was in my kitchen, having a cup of tea with my wife. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw what I thought was my 3-year-old daughter, walk out of the front room and into the entrance hall. I went to see what she was doing, and when I got there, there was no one there. I walked back into the kitchen and said to my wife, something along the lines of, "I'm bloody seeing things. I could have sworn I saw Amelia walking to the front door, but when I got there she was nowhere to be seen." My wife was all like, "You're joking, the same thing happened to me and my mom, just the other day." She explained how the same thing happened to them in the exact same spot, with the mysterious girl taking the exact same route. In fact, so convinced were they that they had seen our daughter, that they crept into the entrance hall after her, to make her jump, but there was no one there. It didn't end there though. A few months later, we saw a post on a local Facebook page, saying, "I had a lovely childhood growing up in our address, LDB really keen to speak to whoever lives there now, particularly to see if they have ever experienced any paranormal goings-on." I direct messaged the poster and asked if she had ever seen anything untoward, without giving any indication of what we had experienced. Lo and behold, her and her sister used to see a little blonde Victorian girl in a white nightie standing outside their bedroom doors or walking through the house. She related how initially they would think it was the other sister and would got to investigate and find no one there. I am a very cynical person by nature and did not previously believe in the paranormal, but I have no explanation for the above. U/Neverland 443 responded. Me and my family went on a holiday to Indonesia in 2019 and I shared a hotel room with my sister. The first morning she mentioned that in the night she'd seen someone walk across our room and stare out the window. She'd even heard the floorboards creak as they moved. She gets sleep paralysis pretty regularly, so we shrugged it off. 2 days later I woke up in the middle of the night to see someone sat at the end of my bed, their hands cupping their face as they cried. I thought it was my sister and sat up. "You okay?" I asked and froze as I realized I could see my sister tucked up in her bed out the corner of my eye. The figure, which was like a living silhouette, was clearly female with long hair tied back in a ponytail. I just kinda slowly lay back down, took out my phone and started watching YouTube videos. I know that sounds stupid, but I figured there wasn't much else I could do. Every now and then I'd look up and see the figure still there and then go back to watching my videos. This lasted about half an hour until I looked up and the woman was just gone.
Thank you for watching. If you like this video, you might enjoy the rest of my content. Check it out.